So there are a number of different ways that you can go about building software with AI, regardless of what your background is. And in this video, I want to show you one of those ways, which will actually allow you to build and deploy software quickly for ideas that you want to launch or bring to life. Now, this involves leveraging AI and the platform GitHub and using GitHub repositories as a way of starting with a template to then modify, draw inspiration from, and iterate on in the process of bringing your software ideas to life. So if you think about it, a lot of the software that already exists, and quite frankly, a lot of the ideas that exist in the world are not new under the sun. You know the saying, nothing is new under the sun. So you would be surprised about what already has been created or attempted to be created. And for those who may have newer ideas, or you're thinking about innovating on a concept that hasn't been explored before, you in a lot of cases can draw from different kinds of projects that have been done, because in some cases, it may be a matter of actually combining concepts that have been explored previously. And so in this scenario, what we're doing is identifying GitHub repositories for ideas that you have and seeing if these ideas have already been built and are open source and have licenses that allow for people to build on top of and use for whatever purposes you may have, whether that may be personal, exploratory, or for commercial intent. We're going to take that GitHub repository that you identify for the idea, clone it using Cursor, and then we're going to prompt Cursor to where it'll create the dependencies and configurations to run this software, and then we will test it out on our computer using localhost. And then once you see it, you'll know the kind of current state that the project is already at based on the GitHub repository that gets cloned. And from there, you can make adjustments, modify it, change it around. And lastly, you'll be able to go ahead and deploy it on a platform like vercel, where you will now have a project that you were able to build using sort of a foundation. So the way I look at it is like you are taking these GitHub open source GitHub repositories as templates, if you will, and having a starting place that is already along the way to what you're looking to achieve. So this is one type of workflow that you can use when you're building software, and it's something that you can leverage with Perplexity and Cursor to where you can do this regardless of if you've coded before or you simply leverage the large language models. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to go over to Perplexity, and there's one idea that I've been thinking about which would solve a need that I currently have, which is when I'm on YouTube, you know, I spend quite a lot of time on YouTube. And one of the things that I deal with is a lack of just time on my hands. And so what I often do now, especially with these large language models, is I'll go on YouTube, and rather than actually watching a whole video, whether it's a podcast or it's just a regular video, I'll go and I'll scrape the whole transcript. I'll copy and paste the whole transcript, pop it into a large language model, and just prompt for the summary or the major points of it, so I can save the 40 minutes or the 15 minutes or however long the actual video is, if I'm really just there to get the information from it. And so what I want to do is I want to build a software that will allow me to just pop in a URL for the YouTube video, and it'll give me a summary or allow me to get the major points from that YouTube video. And so the first step I'm going to take is I'm going to go over to Perplexity, and I'm going to ask it to identify different GitHub repositories for what I'm talking about. So I'm going to say, can you help me identify repos that I can clone for software that will let me paste in YouTube URLs and it will process it to give a summary and or the major points from the YouTube videos. So I'm going to enter that in, and we're going to see what it comes back with. We know Perplexity is a really good platform for search now. We'll see what it says. All right, so it said, based on the results, there are 2 GitHub repositories that offer YouTube video summarization functionality. They gave you this one example here, and then we gave us this example here. This aims to summarize the content of YouTube videos by keeping all the important points and making it short and easily understandable. All right. This one looks pretty cool. Flexible summary modes, smart history system. All right. So I'm going to check this out right here. I'm going to click on this, and it's taking me to this YouTube summarizer page. And so this has an MIT license. So you have these different licenses for the GitHub repositories, and they are what determine the use of the code from the repository. So if it's an MIT license or an Apache license, that means that you can build on top of it and use it as you will. So in this case, this would be, I'm looking at this as a template for what I'm looking to build. So it looks like I'm going to need an API key, flexible API key requirements. I'm going to need an API key from one of these large language models, and it sounds like that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go and I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to now open up Cursor, and then there's actually an option here to clone repos for Cursor. I'm so used to just opening up new projects and cloning it within a new project. So I'm going to just say YouTube video summary, then open this up as a new project. So now within Cursor, you're going to click on Command I, and then in Cursor, you have the normal mode, and then you have the agent mode. So I'm going to be using the agent mode, which will take you through the process, install the commands, create the dependencies for you through prompting, and it'll assume that you want these steps taken for you. So it actually involves less prompting than if you're using the normal normal mode. And so I'm going to go ahead and say, please clone this GitHub repository for me, install and create the required files, dependency configurations, and then run localhost. Ask me for any credentials or information that you need to complete the job. So I'm going to put colon, and then here's the GitHub URL. And so then it's going to now start running this. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and get my API key. So it's going to start to do its thing. So you see it has cloned the repository. All the files are listed here on the left side, and it's checking what needs to actually be set up. It says, I see that this is a Next.js project that requires several API keys to function. Before we proceed with the installation, I'll need you to provide the following API keys. So it looks like it is asking for these 3 API keys because within the project, it's likely that you can use either any of these large language models for the summarize, and then it'll install these dependencies. So I have a Gemini and OpenAI API key already. I don't have a Grok one, so I'm going to go set up a Grok one. And then, all right, so I've set up the API keys here. I got the API keys. I set up an account with Grok, which is a large language model here based in the US. And then I pasted the API keys for Grok, Gemini, and OpenAI. It set up a database, also loaded what it had to, created the dependencies or installed the dependencies, and then now it's running on localhost. So it has it here. You can access it at HTTP localhost 3000. It created the env file, set up a Prisma database, and then the development server has now been started. So what's going on? Copy this URL. And I'm going to paste. All right, so it worked the first time, which is amazing. And we have here YouTube AI Summarizer. Looks like it's got a history tab, and then it's got a home tab, and you can paste in your YouTube URL. English and German are the languages they have. Maybe it was a German guy that created the repository. And then it has 2 options here, video summary and then podcast style. And then you can choose these 3 different large language models, GPT-4, Grok, and Gemini. So we can start with Gemini, and I'm going to go over to YouTube and just pick a video. So I'm going to pick this Forbes video with Issa Rae right here and come back to YouTube, the YouTube Summarizer, and we're going to test this out sometimes, you may have a bug that you have to deal with and work through more, but we'll see what happens. So I'm going to paste in the YouTube URL and click generate summary. All right, so it looks like the summary is generating. It's processing, has these items that are loading here. All right, creating final summary. All right, here we go. So gave you a summary, give you an overview. This is a summary of a Forbes Power Woman Summit, and then all the key points from it. It even provides context and implications, and this is using the Gemini API, and it's functional, and it also looks pretty cool. So this is what it looks like running it on localhost. From there, we could honestly just deploy it as it is, but if you wanted to switch some things around, you'd be very welcome to, right? So let's say that you wanted to switch out the languages, right? It's English and German at this time. So let's say I want to switch out the languages. So I'm going to copy that image. I'm going to post this here and say, this looks great. However, I love for the possible languages to be different. Rather than German, can the languages be, rather than German as the additional language, can it be French and Spanish? And then run that and let's see what it says. So now it's going to help you modify it to include English, French, and Spanish, and then it'll actually go and make those changes for you. The changes have been made successfully, it says. Updated the available languages. All right, I'm going to go ahead and accept this. Restart. All right, so I'm going to go and click on the link for localhost again. Now, if I go on the drop down, you see we have French and we have Spanish. Let's try it out. Let's try it out with French. So I'm going to take a different YouTube video. Let's take this my first million podcast link right here. So I'm going to be honest, I don't even speak French. I know a little bit of French from growing up. I took French in school, but I got that good at it. I became fluent. But to just test this out, I'm going to paste this in and generate a summary. This one's a little bit longer, so processing 12 sections. Great. All right. So here is the video summary of the first million podcast. If anybody's watching this right now and you speak French, you'd be able to verify whether or not this is accurate information, but all seems well. And so there you have it with the YouTube summarizer. And so now this is running locally on your computer. You could leave it at that, or you can actually go ahead and deploy this thing. So you've got platforms like vercel, which will let you actually host this software application. So I'm going to now go ahead and say, this looks great. Can you help me deploy on vercel? And so as you can see, you can continue to modify it. You can iterate on this. You can change the aesthetic. You can add new features. And so you could imagine how you'd maybe go into another GitHub repository, or maybe you have certain features that you'd want to add to this software, and you can make those changes. So we're just going to go ahead and deploy this to get to the finish line in this video. So it says, I'll help you deploy on vercel. Let's make sure everything is properly prepared. It's creating a vercel JSON file, configuration file. All right, so install the vercel CLI if you haven't already. And I was actually doing this for you, right? Now saying, all right, to create a vercel account, log into vercel through CLI. All right, so I have a vercel account. So for those of you who tuned in, vercel is a platform where you can deploy and host your applications on. They also have V0, which is a coding assistant that will help you with developing sites, landing pages. It's really great for building components. So I'm going to come back here, and it says log into vercel. Continue with GitHub. So what might actually be a good idea is before we log in and deploy on vercel, can you help me create GitHub repository for this project? So now that we have this project, this is the iteration that we've created on this, we can actually go ahead and create a GitHub for the project. And then GitHub can directly connect to vercel, which will then, whenever you want to update or make changes or modify, you can just push the updates to GitHub through Cursor, literally prompt for it to happen through Cursor, and it'll then connect directly to vercel and redeploy it whenever you need to make updates. As I said, now let's create a GitHub repo. First, I need to go to GitHub, sign into your account, select new repository. All right, so I'm gonna make a GitHub repository called YouTube Video Summary and fill in the details. All right, so I'm going to go to github.com, new repository name. Literally just going to copy and paste what is suggested. We can keep it public. It says don't initialize with the README. And just go ahead and create repository. So we have that right here. I'm going to copy and paste our URL. All right, so I dealt with some challenges in getting the code pushed to GitHub. So it wasn't actually connecting to GitHub. It had me kind of go about a roundabout way in order to do so. And what that involved was first creating an access token within GitHub. So I went to settings, and then within settings, I got an SSH key. And I'm not going to scroll up from here because my key is naked right there. So it is something you want to keep protected. But once I got that SSH key, the way it says new GPG key right here, above here, you will see new SSH key. You can create that. You paste that into Cursor, and then it was at that point able to push all the code to GitHub so that I'm able to have the full repository there. And then now that the repository is there, I can then finally deploy it on vercel. So I'm going to say, yes, let's. All right, so now in this case, we can say, can log into vercel with GitHub. So it'll actually log in for you with the GitHub account. All right. So we're logged in, set up and deploy. The answer is yes or Y. Which scope should contain your project? So I can be projects. So on vercel, I already have a folder set up for all my projects there. Link to existing project. No, it's going to be a new project. What's your project's name? YouTube video summary. Give what the default is. In which directory is your code located? Enter. Want to modify these settings? No. All right, needs to add these variables to vercel. It's adding them here. All right, so now once you've added in the API keys as it asked for via Cursor, and again, Cursor is connected to vercel right now because you're able to sign in to vercel through GitHub. It's now actually deploying it for you through Cursor. And once that's the case, then the application will be live. All right, so it looks like it has been deployed. So if we log into vercel, we're logged into vercel, but if we go in there, you'll be able to manage that deployment now. But we've also been given the link to use the app. So I'm going to copy this right here where it says the application is live. If I paste that in, this is the application. So now you can share this around with anyone. And the application is now officially live, deployed, and hosted on vercel. So if you go on vercel, you can actually see that it has been deployed, and all of this happened through Cursor. There's a way of actually just going on vercel and manually going through each setting to deploy the project. And then you can also connect it to your GitHub so that when you're updating on GitHub, it will push any updates to redeploy it. All right, so now it's connected to the GitHub. So whenever I have any updates or want to make any adjustments to it, it'll do so. All right, so there you have it. How to, starting from the beginning, going on to Perplexity to identify different GitHub repos for the idea you're looking to build out, seeing if someone's already worked on that project and it's open source and you can have access to build on top of it using the GitHub repository as a template, and then cloning that GitHub repository using Cursor, prompting Cursor to create the dependencies and configurations to then run it on localhost live, making any modifications, iterating on it, and then deploying it to vercel as an application, which you can then use in perpetuity. Let me know how you like this. Let me know what you want to build. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit your notifications for more of these kinds of videos. But until next time, happy building.